this evening, we are very pleased to announce that we are also live on webinar, reaching our HIV members and friends across the province and country for that matter. So welcome to all of those joining us online. We're really glad to have you with us, virtually. As well, a reminder that this event is recorded for future addition to our website and archives. The camera focuses primarily or only on the speakers. No audience members will be recorded or on camera. And lastly, we will have time following the presentation for what we're hoping to be a very lively Q&A debate. So please do stay and write your questions down as they come up throughout the presentations, and the microphone at the back of the room will be used for Q&A, and we will line up when both presenters have spoken. At this time, please allow me to introduce our wonderful speakers. First off will be Denise Becker-Wozniak. Denise Wozniak has had HIV since 1989 and has seen many different medications come and go. She will tell you her journey of trying to manage her meds and be a clear example of what not to do. Denise makes her home in Mission, where she lives with her husband and where she enjoys frolicking in the sprinkler with her dogs. Please join me in welcoming one of our greatest members and speakers, Denise Becker-Wozniak.
That was a good meal, wasn't it? I enjoyed it. Well, this is one of the second times I've been to this community forum, and I love the feel of it because I'm seeing a lot of people I know that I've met before. And as I said, I'm a clear example of what not to do. And I'm hoping that afterwards we'll find out what to do from Kathy. But I'll tell you a little bit about what's happened to me. Some of you may be able to relate to it in the audience, and some of you may not. First of all, I just want to say happy Canada Day for tomorrow. It is yeah, it's a great day, hey, immigrants? Some of you may be able to tell that I'm from England, and tomorrow I will have been here 35 years, so very exciting. I'm a Canadian citizen, proud of it. I supported the Canadians in FIFA. What can I say? I'm Canadian now. All right, let's get started. Managing a mountain of meds. Well, I don't really have a mountain of meds. I have a little hill of meds. It's not so big, but I do realize some people have a mountain of meds. Everybody just put up their hands if they're just on even one medication right now. Yeah. There's a lot of people, right? So we're already connected. We're already a group. I'll just go along to the first slide here. These are my meds on top of the mountain. And I like to call this broke body mountain because that's the way I feel. I feel like my body is a little bit broken, but I'm trying to make it better all the time. On to our next slide. This is one of my biggest problems. I can remember every single song ever written in the 70s, word for word, even I have to say the 60s. However, trying to remember what I was going to do when I walked in a room is almost impossible for me. So I'll go to the bathroom to take my meds, and I think, oh my goodness, look at that pimple on my face. And I'll look in the mirror, try and get that out, and then I think, oh, I've got to wash my hands, go out of the room, go back to my computer, and then I think, I know I went to the bathroom for something, but I can't think what it is. Anybody relate to that? You know, like, yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? And a lot of people think I'm procrastinating. I'm not procrastinating, I just don't remember. My mum did have Alzheimer's. I'm a little bit worried that I could be going that direction, but I do still remember my husband's name, so that's a good thing. You know, I figure it's a good thing. Remembering when I'm in bed. I go to bed at night. I'll be finally cozy, getting into bed, and I'll lie there and I think, oh my God, I've forgotten those meds again. Anybody ever done that? That they've gone to bed and I think, and I'll turn to my husband and say, I've forgotten my meds, I'm not going to get up, I don't want to get up, and he'll say, you've got to get up, and I think, and I really get mad and walk over to the bathroom and take my meds. And then I've got to go for a glass of water. Then I know I've got to take them with food, so I've got to go into the kitchen. And all the while naked, the dogs are staring at me wondering what the heck I'm doing. And finally I get back to bed again. So anyway, you get the idea. Next one, other things on my mind. I have a lot on my mind. A lot of trivia is going on up here. Absolutely worthless stuff is moving through my mind all the time. There's a lot of good things up there too, but there's a lot of CRAP. It's pretty bad some days. And so I have a lot of other things on my mind. And that often pushes my meds out of my mind. If I'm lucky now that I'm down to once a day. But before, when it was twice a day, I never remembered, well, very rarely remembered them in the morning. So I was taking them, when I first started on meds, I was lucky. I started in 1997, so I started when the new meds were in. I could have started before that, but they only had AZT, and there was, you know, I think we all know about AZT, don't we? I mean, I think I was pretty lucky not to start on that big toxic load at that time. And so all of these things on my mind sometimes push it to the back. I feel very healthy. This is my dog. I took a picture out the other day. She's 6 months old, a standard poodle, and she discovered a water sprinkler. I do feel healthy from when I've got HIV, and it's difficult because you're not going to see anybody for another 3 months when they're going to probably tell you you're not as healthy as you thought you were because you're going to get your blood work results, right? Now, if I don't take my antidepressant pills, or if I don't take my anti-anxiety pills, there's an immediate reaction, and my husband will be glad to tell you all about that later. So I feel healthy, which might make me think, oh, I'm going away for the weekend, I'm feeling really good, why bother taking them with me? Like, it's just going to be a pain, I'm going down to the States, you know, I just don't want to do it. I'm trying to be very good right now, but that is something that can happen to a lot of people. Partying and forgetting. Whoa. This is a real drink I had in Mexico that I can remember. I found the worst thing for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, is when they party, sometimes they forget to take their medication. And there are times when I've had 2 or more glasses of wine, and I will wake up the next morning and say to my husband, did I take my medication last night? And he'll say, well, I don't know. And I think, I'm really not sure if I took it. And unfortunately, I don't have the actual containers you can take them in. I've got the little pill bottles, and I've got some of the press out things. But I go over to my medications and I look, and well, there's like 20 left, and there's 10 left, so I'm not sure about that. Then I look at the press out things, maybe there's 2 or 3 left, and I think, well, actually, I'm not sure if there was 2 or 3 yesterday. So I am very aware that partying, drinking is bad for my memory. And I have to be very, very careful of that. So usually I tell Henry, okay, it's time for you to tell me, you know, I'm feeling pretty good right now. Might be cut off time. Okay, let's see what the next, oh, this is my other dog, Ziggy. Now, sometimes you have other things in your life going on, such as somebody else is sick, and you have to take care of them. This happened when my dog happened to pick up a joint that was lying down on the ground. And as you can see, he was pretty stoned at the time we were going to the vet. I had to take a picture of him because he was so stoned at the time. He was in there for hours, and the vet told me if a dog eats any marijuana, it is way worse for them. It is very serious for a dog. But he looked pretty happy at the time, I thought, you know. Anyway, here he is, we're on our way to the vet, and that becomes more important to me than my own health, believe it or not. I know some people say, oh, it's only a dog, it's only a cat. But when you don't have many people in your life because they've passed on, it's not just a dog or just a cat, is it? It's your buddy, right? Now, this here is my daughter and my mother. My daughter died when I found out that she had HIV, and then I found out I had HIV. Once we found that out, my daughter died 3 months later, and this was taken about 3 weeks before she died, unfortunately. And so obviously during that time, it was 1994, and it was very, very serious time for me. I didn't care about myself. At that time, we all thought we were going to die in 1994. I was told I had about 5 years left to live. You know, old people can live 5 years now. Well, at that time, I just wanted to make sure she was going to be okay, because they told me she would probably die before she was 2 years old. In fact, she died 3 months later after we found out. And so at that time, my main concern was making her comfortable, making her giving her morphine injections so she wasn't in pain. It was a terrible thing to go through. And then, much later after she had died, my mother died eventually. And as I said, she had Alzheimer's. Now, when you're looking after somebody with Alzheimer's, is anybody here looking after their parents who are elderly or who have to deal with elderly parents who have problems? I sympathize. It is very, very hard, because you're trying to make sure they get their meds. You are run ragged trying to make sure that they're okay, and then you have to look after yourself as well. It's a very difficult time. I hope everybody's feeling really sorry for me by now. It sounds like, oh, poor me story. But anyway, I wanted to put that in, because I think a lot of us are facing our parents getting older as we age. And then, of course, we're aging as well. We're getting older. And as we age, we're going to be getting, you know, more illnesses, dementia maybe heart problems. And I've heard that, of course, we're going to get them quicker than other people because we've got HIV. And that's going to be very difficult for us. And so this is why it's so important to have this talk today on how to manage things. And I'm really looking forward to finding out how to manage things. Now, okay, I couldn't go on without mentioning homeless people. How difficult. My heart just cries for homeless people. How difficult must it be for them to manage their meds at the same time as dealing with homelessness and not having an address? It's got to be awful. And this picture I took down, in fact, I didn't show it on this picture because I was entering this for a contest and I didn't think it was a very good thing to do, but this is actually Burke's on the left, Burke's Jewelers. And these men were lying outside on the grate, and I noticed the lady walking past them, and I had to take a picture because I thought it was very poignant, that picture. And so at one point, I really felt myself that I was going to be homeless. I was very, very poor at the time. And thank God my world changed around, and I met a wonderful man who is in this room, and I'm blessed, really. Bless. We joke about that. We said, oh, bless. No. What can happen when you're on meds? Well, here's a nice lady just coming up and reminding us that we need to be on meds with some nice milkshake or ice cream and a big apple. I have no idea what that is she's carrying. But she does have the pill that I was on. And I don't know if anybody knows that pill, but I will tell you what it is. It's nevirapine. Viracept is another name for it. Viracept was a curse for me. I have always been very allergic to various medications, HIV medications in particular. I got nevirapine given to me by my lovely Dr. Julio, and he said, if you notice that you seem to be getting hot and getting a rash, then let us know, but don't worry about it. Now, if that rash gets any worse, say over the next few days, if you notice like up to a week it's getting worse, then you could be getting something called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. Anybody here heard of Stevens-Johnson syndrome? Yeah. Okay. You're about to hear about Stevens-Johnson syndrome. That night I went to a party and I started itching, and I was getting pretty itchy. And I thought, oh, this must be the rash. It doesn't matter if you get this rash, it's when it gets worse. I went to bed that night and woke up. This is how I looked when I woke up. All over my skin. And I thought, I'm wondering if I'm just hot. Is this a heat rash or is this it? So of course, what do you think I did? You know, they tell you to get to a hospital right away. What would you do? You'd Google it, of course. You go to your computer and make sure that's what you've got, right? That's what I always do. So I went to the computer and I looked at my eye. This was my eye, and my eye had a lot of red in the white of it. And I looked and I thought, you know, I think I've got this thing called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And so I decided that I would go and just get myself ready and get down to the hospital. And as I was getting ready, my husband woke up and he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I think I better get down to the hospital. And so he turned on the light and he said, oh my God! And I was covered in head to foot with this rash. I got down to the hospital and I was living in Kelowna at the time. And I've lived in Kelowna and Vernon. Now you'd think Kelowna, it's got a pretty big hospital. However, I got in there, well, the first thing, the lady's working away, and she looks up and she said, oh my God. And she said, you know, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm on nevirapine. She said, don't know what that is, right? So then she went to see the doctors. The doctor came out to see me. What do you say this is? And I said, nevirapine. They're looking it up. And then, of course, you know, it takes them a while because it's not like St. Paul's where we've got posters around and that. It was very slow in those days because maybe they didn't have a fast, maybe it was dial-up computer, who the hell knows. But anyway, before you know it, I was on a drip and I actually came out of that pretty fast. I didn't bring any pictures of what Stevens-Johnson syndrome can look like. You don't want to see them. It is absolutely disgustingly gross. And it basically is your skin disintegrating. It can be extremely serious and you can die of it. So you need to get in there right away. Okay. Wow, let's see what, okay. We get to the part of the presentation, what can happen when you are not on a med and the pharmacist, when you're on a med and the pharmacist doesn't know you're HIV positive and they don't have a record of you being HIV positive. Now this, interestingly enough, was not my medication, it was my husband's medication. He had esophageal reflux. Reflux, is that correct, Henry? Yeah. And so he had to take some pills for it. And I'm really terrible for this, and I drink myself. I have a few drinks here and there, like a happy hour. But I always think, I've got to find out if Henry's not meant to drink on this pill. So I got the paper and I started looking through what it said. And they just said to him, is he allergic to any meds? And he said no. Or anything else. And I started looking through, what did I find? Who should not take Tecta? Anyone also taking the med atazanavir. Now, Henry's not HIV positive, I am. If that had been me going to get that medication and it didn't show that I was HIV positive, I could have had a serious reaction because I'm on atazanavir and they wouldn't have known, because I'm not registered as an HIV patient at the pharmacy. What could have also happened is if I had a burning stomach, and I know I'm not meant to be taking magnesium or antacids, I might have stolen one of his antacid pills, and how did I know I'm not meant to be taking it because I'm on atazanavir? So that was quite serious. Now, I'm not saying do or don't do, I don't, whatever, it's your life, I don't care. I mean, I do care, really, I really care. But I do very much care. But all I'm saying is, I'm just saying that would have been a problem for me. And so I need some instruction on what I should be doing, obviously. This is how I feel right now. I feel like I've got no handlebars and I'm heading downhill with no direction. I'm on a bike and I'm just freewheeling it, but what the heck's going to happen next? And are we going to be telling people we've got HIV? What does that mean for us? I don't really know. I'm pretty vocal with it right now, and I will stand up to people. Some people don't have that opportunity. And so with that, I would just like to finish by saying Happy Canada Day, and I'm passing it over to Kathy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Denise. I always smile whenever I hear you speak, for multiple reasons, but always good ones. Our next speaker is Kathy Lepek, and Kathy is a clinical pharmacist at St. Paul's Hospital Ambulatory Pharmacy, where she provides care for HIV-positive persons. She is also the research coordinator for the BC Centre for Excellence in HIV/AIDS Pharmacovigilance Initiative, where her work focuses on monitoring adverse drug reactions, side effects to antiretroviral drugs, and protecting patient safety. We are delighted to have Kathy join us this evening and present a much more science view of this project, and I'm sure you will all have lots of questions at the end. Kathy?
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you so much, Denise, for your very wonderful, as always, presentation and just lived experience. So, changing gears, not too much, because we're all talking really about the same thing.
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, okay. How are we now? Good. And you just keep giving that feedback, because I may get all excited and do this, and then you need to bring me back here. So thank you. It's a team effort, folks. Just very quick housekeeping measures first. We have no conflicts of interest to declare, and we will be talking about health-related topics, but in this particular venue, not providing personalized healthcare advice, although we certainly welcome everybody to see their care providers and follow up on any personal questions of that matter that may come out of this. Let's just start by addressing that word. When Shelley first approached Denise and I about talking about the topic of polypharmacy, we both said, could we not use that word? And that's okay, here we are. But so I started talking to a lot of my colleagues and just people around as I was getting ready, and I said, what does polypharmacy mean? And a lot of people said, oh, that would mean going to a lot of pharmacies. Actually, what it means is taking a lot of medications, but beyond that, there's no one agreed on final definition of what that means. Some definitions say taking more than 5, some say taking more than 10. I'm actually not sure that the number is really what matters so much as maybe it's just more medications than you're able to cope with easily and that seems overwhelming. The word polypharmacy also has a bit of a negative meaning to it. Very often it's implying that people are taking more medications than are absolutely necessary for them to take. And the idea being that perhaps there should be less medications, or being able to thin it down. And I'm going to try some technology here, folks. I don't usually use the clicker. It works. So our goal tonight is to just be very practical and talk about practical tips for managing taking a lot of medications, whatever that number means for you. Because for some people, even 1 or 2 medications a day can feel like an overwhelming mountain of medications. And just again, to be a little jargony here, we're going to use words like meds and drugs and pills, and all meaning the same thing. So meds is really an abbreviation for medication. So let's start out with a little bit of a theoretical ideal, and this is the textbook definition, pretty much from a textbook, of what medication management ideally looks like. And the way the how-to manual goes for healthcare professionals is before adding another drug to a mix, to a person's regimen, whether that's the first drug or the 10th drug, before adding a drug, always consider very carefully, will the benefits of taking that new medication outweigh the risks? In other words, the side effects of the medication are going to be outweighed by the good health effects, and that it's also, going to outweigh the added cost to that person. Will the drug interact badly with medications the person is already taking or with other medical conditions that the person already has? And consider that, how that goes in the mix. And when we're adding a drug, review the whole list and think, can another drug be discontinued when we're adding this new one rather than just adding it on top? Maybe the person is taking multiple drugs for the same condition, and we can make things a bit simpler with this new medication. Or are there some drugs going on, continuing on for conditions that have already resolved, and we can actually, take some old drugs away because they're not needed anymore. The entire list of drugs should be reviewed every once in a while so that people are only taking the minimum amount of necessary drugs. And also consider the big picture of medications in terms of, overall health goals. And this is particularly often referred to as people approach their later years, looking at simplifying things as we get quite elderly. And, an example that's often used is cholesterol medication, which reduces your long-term risk of having a cardiovascular, a heart attack or some other event. Well, when someone's 95, you really need to look at that long-term risk, and maybe they really don't need this medicine in their life anymore because of other things that are going on. So that's the ideal. What could possibly go wrong with, an ideal like that? So really what we're talking about tonight, more than anything, is as a consumer in the healthcare system, as a patient, and I'm a patient in the healthcare system too, how do we advocate for ourselves? How do we, make ourselves knowledgeable and learn how to advocate for ourselves with our care providers to get the best possible care? So looking at some kinds of things that sometimes go wrong with this ideal, and looking at how we can protect ourselves against this, one of the important things is who's looking after the big picture. We've talked about wanting all these drugs to be well together, as few as possible, the right mix. Who's in charge of making sure that happens? Now, ideally, there should be one care provider, and that's usually the family doctor or the GP, who's going to coordinate all the treatment decisions. But sometimes what happens when there are multiple care providers involved, especially as, there may get several specialists involved in the team, and they're all looking, doing a very excellent job at taking care of their specialty area, sometimes the communication breaks down between the care providers, and drugs are prescribed without thinking of the overall picture. And I know, Denise really struck my heart when she was talking about elderly parents, and I looked after both my parents through very long illnesses as they were elderly, and my mom in particular was like a poster child for polypharmacy and having multiple specialists. And at one point there was you remember dealing with a bit of an argument between her heart specialist, who insisted that she must be on a blood thinner because she was at such high risk of stroke, and her gastroenterologist, who insisted she must never be on a blood thinner because she was at risk of having a bleed in her stomach. And there was a bit of a war going on between those two specialists, and it required some very careful coordination and discussion and negotiating to try and come up with a care plan that they both felt was reasonable and good for her. So it can be challenging to be caught a little bit in the middle of that. So what can I do to protect myself? Well, one of the simplest, and you're going to hear me say this a bunch of times because it's so important, is keeping an up-to-date list of all your medications. That doesn't necessarily mean memorizing the names of all of them because that can be a bit overwhelming, but have it written down somewhere, a list that you can hand people that said, these are all the medications that I'm taking currently. I love it when people do that. When people come to see me in the pharmacy and they say, and of course I can look it up, and I do look it up, but when someone comes and says, yeah, this is what I'm on, and this one at the top there, that's the new one that I started since the last time I saw you. It's wonderful, and it speeds up because you only have a short time in a doctor's appointment or with a specialist, and that can speed things up a lot. The other thing to have is if you've got multiple care providers, specialists for different conditions, have a list of who they all are, and even better, have their phone number beside their name. Because again, I love it when someone says, when I'm thinking, oh, I think I need to talk to your doctor, I'm just going to contact, who is it that prescribes that for you? And they say, oh, Dr. Smith, and this is his phone number. That we just leapt ahead, so much in terms of getting the problem solved by having that information quickly available. Bring out those lists to all your healthcare appointments. You may not end up needing them, but it'll be right there if you do need it. And do see the primary care provider regularly. And I know from bringing my mom and my parents to lots of appointments, you start to feel exhausted from all those appointments sometimes. And you're so busy going to different specialists that you never actually see your family doctor. And the reason that this is important is it's hard to have someone managing the whole picture when they're not even in the picture. So keep that primary care provider in the loop so that they can advocate for you. And it may be worth, as things get more complicated, as more and more specialists get involved, I think it's really worth maybe having that conversation with your family doctor saying, I'm hoping, this is getting really complicated for me, and I'm really relying on you to be coordinating this, and what do you need, what do you need to know to help me with this? Because if you find that that isn't the role, that who you thought was your primary care provider is they're not thinking that that's their job, okay, that's a bit of a problem. So, either you're needing to switch things up a bit or just have a conversation to help make that happen. And, sometimes I find with, particularly in HIV care, sometimes it ends up being, for example, the HIV specialist who ends up being that key person who's coordinating the care. So it doesn't have to be a GP, but that's just often how it is. Again, that person has to be in the picture to be able to be helping advocate that way. So drug interactions. Now, as a pharmacist, this is in particular, a role of managing drug interactions. Or am I not? Oh, okay, we're good. Okay. A drug interaction really is talking about when two or sometimes more medications are given together, it changes the way that they behave. So they might play very nicely on their own and have predictable effects of what they should be doing and not doing in your body, but when you give them together, they don't behave the same way. And one way that we often think of it is perpetrators and victims. So the perpetrator, or the aggressor, if you want to think of it, is a drug that affects the absorption, or maybe how the liver metabolizes the drug, or how the kidneys eliminate a drug of the victim drug. So the perpetrator makes a change in the body that results in the victim drug either not being absorbed, or maybe not being as effective as it should be, or being more toxic than it would normally be. And the more medications there are in the picture, the more likely the risk that there might be a drug interaction that is of importance. And, you know, there's all kinds of theoretical drug interactions. We only really need to worry about the ones that are really clinically important, meaning there will actually possibly be a not good outcome because of taking the two together. And in fact, the one that Denise mentioned with taking Tecta with atazanavir, in fact, is a really, really big one, because the Tecta can reduce the levels of atazanavir so much by preventing it from being absorbed into the body that there can actually be treatment failure. So that actually would be a really big one. So like any fight, sometimes the outcome can be pretty predictable. And you've got a clear path, you know what drug A is doing to drug B, and you can actually accommodate that by adjusting doses or, maybe just avoiding the fight altogether. And sometimes when there are a lot of meds, the outcome isn't really predictable. And I spend a lot of time scratching my head going, okay, well, this one could make it go up, and this one could make it go down. And I don't really know which one's going to win. So in those scenarios, we have to just be very watchful and careful and aware that things may change. And you may find that you're needing to come back for monitoring a little more often than you would like in the short term, just until everybody's sure that things are being safe and effective. So how do we even know if something's going to be a drug interaction? Well, there's all kinds of science and all kinds of references related to this. Now, I've been working as a pharmacist since 1983. And back in the day, that's kind of a little bit like what it was like in the basement of Shaughnessy Hospital. And the fact that any of you have been from Vancouver for a long time and know that Shaughnessy Hospital isn't even open anymore tells you a little bit about how long I've been at this. And, we learned about drug interactions in school. We used our clinical experience. We knew the drugs that were most likely to be the bad actors and that we'd have to really check on. And we'd look it up in a book, and we had stacks of those, to double check if we had a suspicion. And the only thing that went ping in the pharmacy when I started out was the carriage return bell on the manual typewriter that we had, because most pharmacies were not computerized back then, including Shaughnessy Hospital. But we had actually a very fancy electric typewriter. So in the present day, everything's very, very automated, very computerized, and there are a lot of automated drug interaction checks that will actually look at the Pharmanet profile. Now, Pharmanet, just to be sure, again, you've probably heard that word. Pharmanet is a centralized database of prescription records in British Columbia, and specifically in community pharmacies, not hospitals. And so if you fill a prescription at a community pharmacy anywhere across the province, that medication, a record of it is in Pharmanet. And so it helps with, if I fill one medication in Prince George because I'm on holiday, and then I come back to Vancouver and I fill some other medications, the computer software is actually going to look within Pharmanet, and it's going to go, aha, you know what, there's a drug interaction, because we can see all the medications that are in there.
When did Pharmanet start?
Pharmanet started in the mid-90s. And there's, yes, now you maybe know where I'm going with this, or maybe not, but yes, it's from the mid-90s. And if you're looking at it through a pharmacist's eyes, you can see the last 14 months worth of medications that have been dispensed. The archive is older than that, but it's not really visible, from either professionally or publicly. So there's all these automated checks. There are also all kinds of online databases. The trouble is that now, these days, lots of things go ping. And in fact, a lot of these automatic search tools are, not set at a threshold necessarily of clinical importance, so it's just like being in a cloud of flies sometimes, trying to dispense a prescription, because everything, all these pop-ups are coming up. Oh, this is being refilled early by 16 days, and this is, there's a drug interaction, there's this, and so what happens is people get alert fatigue, and sometimes, even though we now have all these tools, just like back in the day, every once in a while drug interactions get missed. And what I particularly, if I can make my technology, want to make sure that everyone is aware of is that because, and I'm not excusing this because we all have to do our jobs, right? But because everyone is so used to and so plugged into these automated detection systems and so used to alerts coming up, that we all need to remember that drugs that are not part of the PharmaNet record are not going to be, first of all, they're not visible, like you can't even see them, just as Denise was saying, unless you let the pharmacist know or your doctors know, they have no way of knowing what medications are not, you're on if they're not part of the PharmaNet record. The other thing is that those potential interactions bypass all of the automated detecting. So even if you tell someone, oh, I'm taking these medications, it still needs to be a manual check or a special check that they need to do. It's not automatically going to scan all the other drugs and check that record. And the reason that we're really hitting on this right now is that HIV medications are not part of PharmaNet. So that was in fact, let's not even go by the history, but they're not in this moment. And in the future, that may or may not change, but right now, it's just a thing to be aware of. And just to be, HIV meds are not the only things that aren't on PharmaNet. If you get a medication sample from your doctor, it says, well, I'm thinking of putting you on this new cholesterol med, but here's a free sample of a few days worth. Just try it out, see if that sits well with you, and if it looks like it's going to be the right fit, then I'll write a prescription. But until you actually have that prescription filled through a pharmacy, that medication won't be on PharmaNet. The same with over-the-counter, non-prescription drugs that are purchased, meds that are given in hospital. There are a few things that don't show up. So again, what can I do to protect myself and make sure that I'm getting the best care in that kind of setting? Again, we're back to the complete list of medications, including the HIV medications. Whenever a brand new medication is filled, I think it's really worthwhile making sure that you actually speak to the pharmacist, before you leave the pharmacy with it and say, or maybe when you're dropping the prescription off at either end, maybe both ends, and specifically say, now, I'm on a few other medications. I just want to make sure that this new one is not going to be interacting. And just as a reminder, or as a new piece of information, if you're going to a pharmacy where you haven't been before, these are some other meds I'm taking. I know they're not on PharmaNet, and I think it's even worthwhile because people are busy and distracted, and you may be in the back of a grocery store where there's all kinds of things going on, and there's a wet mop cleanup in aisle 6 and all of that, just to really say, I'm on these medications, they're not on PharmaNet, and so I know they're not going to be automatically checked for interactions, and I really need you to make sure before paying for it, before leaving the store, because you don't want to find this out after, if there's going to be an interaction with, other meds that I'm on. Certainly, absolutely, for HIV medications in particular, absolutely, you can call the St. Paul's Hospital Pharmacy, and we will either check for you, or your community pharmacist can also call us, and we can either give the information and also do some teaching as to where they can look to find that information in the future. The other thing is, there's many aisles in the pharmacy where there are non-prescription medications that people can select themselves. And, either with the help of the pharmacist behind the counter to say, can you tell me what I can take for my stomach? Or because you've seen it on TV or asked a friend or done some research and you can choose it yourself. The list, non-prescription medications are still medications and they can have drug interactions. And just to highlight a few, by no means comprehensive, but a few things which to be particularly aware of, any drug that can decrease stomach acid, whether that's a neutralizing drug like Tums or Maalox that just neutralizes the acid there, or whether it's a drug that suppresses stomach acid like ranitidine, which has a brand name Zantac, and there's all kinds of generic versions of it as well, or famotidine. These are drugs that really suppress secretion of stomach acid. For various mechanisms, all those things can interact with quite a few different drugs. And this, in fact, is the kind of drug that Denise was talking about earlier. Vitamin and mineral supplements, it's usually the mineral part of it that causes the issue. So the calcium, iron, magnesium, again, that's often due to a binding that prevents absorption of some kinds of drugs. The anti-inflammatory drugs like aspirin and ibuprofen can be an issue, not necessarily a physical interaction, but can enhance the toxicity of some other drugs that you might be on. Cold medications that have decongestants in them can be a real problem for people with high blood pressure. Herbal medications and some foods, St. John's wort is always the one that gets the bad press. And in fact, I think it's gotten so much bad press, I don't see it being used nearly as much now as it used to, because it really can interact with a lot of prescription medications. Ginkgo biloba, which is often sold as a memory enhancer, goodness knows I need to remember to get some of that. But no, it can interact with a number of medications. Garlic, I really think garlic is more if you're taking it as a supplement, in an actual medicinal doses. The odd bit of garlic in food for a typical, the way people typically use it, not so much. But as a health medication, be careful with garlic, and grapefruit juice certainly does interact with a number of meds too. Not a comprehensive list, but these are some of the common ones that I see coming up. For HIV medications specifically, be aware particularly of the drugs that decrease stomach acid, some of the minerals, ibuprofen. St. John's wort, again, a big deal for all of them, probably not that much used. I'm going to change track a little bit, and if you have, we've agreed we're going to do questions at the end, so we'll carry on with that plan, but certainly if you have any questions, we'll address them later. I couldn't think of a really flowy, place to put this, so I'm just gonna change track directly and say, there's some issues that come up with continuity of care, and sometimes they're, and I'm particularly talking about when there are care transitions. This could be, changing physicians, like when you move maybe and you need to find a physician in your new community. But in particular, I'm talking about, around the time of hospital admission. And hospital admissions can either be very acute and abrupt and unexpected and unplanned, or sometimes they can be a little bit more expected. You're knowing you're going for surgery, or you're knowing that things are a bit unstable and there's maybe been a bit of in and out of hospital. There's this buzzword, there's always a flavor of the week. There's always a thing that's the thing to do, the new thing. And right now it's MedRec. MedRec. Everybody's talking about MedRec, which is short for medication reconciliation, which is a wonderful idea. It's a wonderful idea. It's something that should be happening all the time, even before we called it MedRec. It's saying that when a person is admitted to hospital, somebody should make a special point of finding out what medications they're taking, what doses those medications are on, reviewing the list, making sure that things get continued in hospital when they should be, and maybe making sure some things are stopped when in fact the person shouldn't have been on them at all, and it's a really good opportunity to take care of that. So it's a great idea. MedRec, the way it's set up, is primarily based as a starting point on the PharmaNet profile. Now, what's not on PharmaNet? This is a thing. HIV medications are not on PharmaNet, and among other things. So, to start with, that starting point of the MedRec sheet that gets printed out, that somebody's going to, a nurse or one of the other hospital staff is going to come up and make sure that, go through your list of medications. It starts out, the basis is the PharmaNet profile. So right away, HIV medications will not be on that list. Now, it's not the end of the story, because in fact, to do medication history properly, what's supposed to happen is that, whoever's in charge of doing that MedRec exercise should be coming to the person or an advocate or other care, person who's involved in their care and saying, okay, here's the list of medications. Is there anything left off? Is there anything we need to add? Is there anything that shouldn't be on here? And that's the opportunity to say, well, yes, actually, there are these HIV medications. Unfortunately, sometimes what happens is that second step doesn't happen. Even more unfortunately, what sometimes happens is I've heard stories from patients who have been very frustrated and said, I told them I was on HIV meds. I told them for days. And they never did anything about it. They never believed me. Because, unfortunately, sometimes people take it very literally. No, that's not on PharmaNet, so it doesn't exist. Okay, what can we do here to protect against that? There are some things. First of all, again, have your own list, right? And one of my pharmacy colleagues in the community, she said to me, okay, here's what I do. And this is what I tell my patients. You have 4 lists, okay? You have 4 copies of your list on your fridge. You get admitted to hospital, or you're going there. First one goes to the charge nurse and emerge, right? She loses it, whatever. You've got 3 more still. Don't worry about it. Next one, you're admitted. Goes to the admitting doctor, admitting nurse. They go, they lose it. You still got 2. You're still fine. So eventually, if you have all 4 copies of it, it's going to get to somebody who really is going to look at it and notice that. That's one thing. The other thing is I really encourage, and this speaks to always trying not to run out of meds, which there's so many reasons for that kind of planning, but if you're able, before you go to the hospital, if it's planned or if you've got even just a little bit of lead time that okay, I think I need to go to emergency, grab your meds, bring them with you, and you say, now, these are the medications I'm on. That serves 2 purposes. It proves you're on them because it's your name and there's the bottle and it's a reasonably recent dispensing date. And it also is a supply that you can actually take in the hospital, at least for the first few days until the hospital gets those medications from St. Paul's, because most hospitals in BC do not actually stock HIV medications in their pharmacy or on site, because of the very enormous expense involved. St. Paul's and a few other sites across the province are the only depots where it's on site. So to avoid treatment interruption, having your own supply of meds, and in fact, a lot of hospitals will use the own supply when people are in, especially if it's a short term. The other thing is have your care providers call St. Paul's. There is a pharmacist on call at all times who can be paged, or call on the on-call cell phone to verify. And that's what we do. And we often, on the people who are on call on the weekends, often will be verifying medications for folks who have been admitted to hospital somewhere. If you're comfortable having something like a wallet card or keeping your list of medications on your person, if you're comfortable doing that, again, that's certainly a way to always have that list with you. So we keep talking about medication lists, medication lists. Well, how do you get one of those? You know, how do you do that? How do you do that? Certainly from St. Paul's, we can give 3 minutes. Alrighty, let's do that. Your community, we can give you a list of HIV meds. Your community pharmacist can also give you a list of medications that have been dispensed in the community. Really encourage you to, if you find a pharmacy you like where you're getting good service, get all your medications there. They're able to print off your profile more easily and do lots of things for you. What else can I do? Okay, we've looked at, you know, how to manage what's out there, but how do we simplify? You know, what if the list is just too long? What can I do? Well, what I can start by doing is simplify the medications I'm choosing myself. So self-selected products like vitamins, over-the-counter medications. Really think about, you know, how many of these do I absolutely need in my life? The other thing is adjusting expectations of, you know, they call it a pill for every ill. You know, we all want to feel better, right? We all want to feel well, and the reality is there are some symptoms that just are really tough to manage, and throwing more and more and more medications at them doesn't necessarily get us any farther. And so having that realistic conversation with our care provider of how good can this get? You know, are we at the limit of how much I can expect to resolve this, so that we can potentially simplify if all those meds aren't actually causing that much more benefit. Preparing for a discussion with the doctor to ask, is it possible for me to reduce the number of meds that I'm on? First of all, again, know what you're on and what in general they're for, and have a respectful discussion. And sometimes things break down a little bit with this discussion because the doctor's priorities of the most important meds that he or she thinks you should be on may not be the same that I think. You know, I want to keep my sleeping pill and my pain meds and the Viagra, please. And your doctor is saying, well, you know, really the most important ones are that blood pressure medication and the cholesterol lowering medication. Well, those ones don't make me feel better. I don't really want to keep those ones. So there can be a bit, you know, you need to come to a negotiation and an understanding of what is the highest health value. Please don't just stop. Please, please, especially the HIV medications, but also, because there's a concern of drug resistance, but also please be aware, you know, blood pressure medications, abruptly stopping, there can be a rebound in blood pressure that can actually cause enormous damage. Abruptly stopping some antidepressants can really lead to mood problems and physical issues. They really need to be tapered safely. So it's not that it's impossible to stop, but really consult your doctor as to how to safely stop some medications. How are we doing? Are we over here? We're good? Okay.
I think we've got a lot of questions in the house.
Okay. So just to give a teaser then, you know, as the pill count rises, sometimes the ways of managing it need to also change. And whether that is, you know, I used to always remember, so many people say, you know, I never had trouble remembering. I always took my HIV meds on time. And then I had blood pressure, and then I had cholesterol, and now I've got diabetes, and I've got some of those. And I just said, yeah, you know, all of a sudden I'm starting to forget. And I didn't used to forget. As time goes on, as the mix of medications changes, sometimes the techniques for remembering need to change too. And, you know, adding cell phone reminders or little clocks, things that go beep, adjusting the times and the routines. Some people say, you know, when I was working, I had this particular routine that really worked. Now that I'm retired, I'm finding I need a different routine to remember to take my meds. dosettes and pill containers. There are all kinds of things that can be done with, you purchased at the pharmacy for med management. There's also blister packing and daily dispensing that can support. And what could be an entire discussion in itself, and we'll maybe just touch on it and, before we open up, is sometimes the most simple and as low number of pills is still just not simple enough, and it just feels hard. It does. It just feels hard. And how do we cope with that? And one thing that after 30 years of pharmacy experience and talking to so many people and trying to help people navigate through their daily pill routines is the distinction between forgetting and avoiding. And forgetting, there are all kinds of tips that we can use to help people remember. If it's, I want to take it, but I just forget, there are all kinds of things we can do. If really at the core of it is, I just don't want to take that. That's tougher. It's not unchangeable, it's not unfixable, but it's much, much tougher to deal with, to deal with forgetting than avoiding. And I will just leave you with this, is that some of the short-term day-to-day tricks help with both. Because I have so many things in my life that I'd really rather avoid. Really, you have no idea. But the ones I'm less likely to avoid and step away from and push away from are the ones that are just easy for me. So making it so easy for myself. I don't want to get out of bed to take my pills, but gosh, they're right there. I always go to bed with a glass of water and the pills are on the nightstand. Maybe I can roll over and take those because they don't need to be with food, maybe, or whatever reason. Focus on the reasons why I do want to take these rather than why I don't, because there often are reasons why I do want to take these and be healthy. In the long term, trying to get to the center of what some of those reasons are, and they're hard things. I don't want to take this because it reminds me that I have this disease, or I don't want to take this because it makes me feel old. I hear that, it makes me feel old. Old people take cholesterol pills. I'm not old. Fear, stigma, fear of somebody seeing me take my pills and thinking that knowing I have HIV or thinking other things, knowing I may have a mental health issue, feeling hopeless or depressed. These are all really important barriers and things that need to be addressed, and not to bring it down, but I think it's stuff that is good to talk about. So in summary, just for practical medication management, know who's running the show, identify, all be in agreement that your GP or whoever also knows that they're running the show, make them aware of all the changes that are going on. Keep an up-to-date list of medications. Know what your meds are for in very general terms. You don't have to, even if you just write it down beside it, the blue one for the heart, is helpful. Before taking a new medication, have a bit of an understanding and talk with your doctor and pharmacist about the benefits and risks. Review that list annually, about once a year with your doctor, and always keep this in the perspective of the big picture and what the overall health goals are. And thank you for your patience.
All right, ladies, would you like to come and join me up here at the table? You guys can have a seat, and I'll give you this microphone. That microphone, excuse me, at the back of the room, right beside the pillar, is open and on. And if anyone would like to go over there and start this question period off, we also have, I believe, questions coming from online. So, Michelle, if you'd like to start, I will pass the microphone over.
I do not want to start.
Oh, well. I somehow think you will.
But I'm getting up.
And I'll pass the mic over to the girls. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment on when you're talking about simplifying your self-selected medication, like as in vitamins and supplements. Just wanted to comment that, just for myself, I'll say that I take those supplements to, preserve the organ function that I have, right? my strategy is like cycling them out, like doing this for 3 months and doing that for 3 months, in order to preserve what's left. Right? So I just wanted to disagree with that comment and see what your opinion is.
I think, sorry, I knew maybe rushing to finish near the end, so certainly was not implying by any means that there is no value to vitamins or supplements or any of the other self-selected medications. The point that I was trying to make is that often what I hear when people are talking about, I'm so overwhelmed with the number of pills that I'm taking a day, and we go through what all of them are, sometimes people are taking 10, 15 vitamin supplement pills and saying, and I'm so overwhelmed, and they have one HIV pill, and that's their only prescription, and they're saying, but I'm just so overwhelmed by these number of pills, I wish I could take less pills. And so it's not, when someone is deriving benefit, absolutely, absolutely. So we're really talking about when people are looking at trying to systematically go through the list, and maybe, some of those supplements, or they're talking about cost too, and because it can add up. Just really reviewing the list of everything that's there, and that by no means to imply that there's no value to, and sometimes those are what you want to keep, and your doctor, with your doctor's agreement, maybe a cholesterol medication, for example, could be dropped because now there's a healthier diet and exercise program. So does that answer or put it in perspective for you?
Yes, and also
Of course.
Yeah, actually, I really get that, what you're saying, because I actually take a lot of vitamins to counteract the drugs, right? I mean, I'm taking them to have a little bit of energy, a lot of energy, actually. It changed me totally. And I don't get peripheral neuropathy now because I'm taking vitamins. So those kind of things are pretty big to me. And in addition to that, it lowered my cholesterol because I'm taking omega. Right? Those kind of things, and in the end, what's cutting me back on all of that is the cost of it. It's expensive to take good vitamins. And I guess I have to make a decision over what I'm going to take. I may end up not taking calcium now because of this. But, it's kind of a balancing act, right? Thanks for the question, though. That's a very important thing.
Okay, it's on. To go along with the supplements, it's kind of interesting that the pharmacists at IBC, they told me to take calcium, magnesium, and I'm on 4 different pills. So, but on your expose, it was not okay. Like it could be some interaction. So. But I guess it's not with all the drugs.
Yeah.
It depends on what drugs you are.
Exactly. It's not with all, and really we're talking about what to watch out for and ask questions about to make sure that the spacing, with calcium and magnesium, very often with those ones, spacing it by a few hours from the drugs that they will interact with makes it okay again. So again, supplements are, the reason that they exist is because they are helpful. But just making sure that, just being aware that, just as antacids are very, very helpful too, just being aware of spacing them in the right way with your medications. And perhaps you're not on medications that it's even an issue for, because it's not with all medications.
Okay. The other question, I have quite a few questions. Trying to see if I can read what I wrote on that. First of all, thanks for both of you for talking tonight. And Denise, I've heard you the first time. I was glad again to hear you tonight. I thought that the pharmacists knew about all your meds. I know that when I go, I have that list that you make. I make myself a spreadsheet of all my HIV med, other medications, and all my supplements that I take. And every time I go to the pharmacist, I give it to them. But they seem to be aware that I'm on HIV meds. So does it go on the PharmaNet system if you tell them or give them your HIV meds?
It does not go on PharmaNet. However, However, every pharmacy has a local computer system that is only within their pharmacy. That's how they generate the pharmacy labels that go on your prescription bottles. And if you choose to tell your, and this is why also it's a great idea if you've got a pharmacy that you like dealing with, to always go to that pharmacy, because although they cannot put those medications by law on PharmaNet, they can put them in their local system. And so if you go to the same place, they will know your medications. And in fact, they can even enter in your non-prescription medications, just so that those will be in their alert system too. And I'm really glad you asked that question, because again, we didn't have time to sort of cover everything at the beginning, but that is a very important way that you can get great care.
Okay, I'll ask my question, other question after.
Yeah, been on AIDS combos from when there wasn't anything, to where it was 7 pill or 43 pills 7 times a day, to the one that's really easy now. But I asked Dr. Montana, I said, what do you think my next cocktail will be? And he said, embalming fluid. No, it's not a question. I always go as a double check. I take my partner Blake. A lot of people probably know him here. I always go with him because he's totally stupid. He's not listening, you see, when it comes to medical stuff, and we get a double check because there's both of us. But I recently went in because I was having prostate problems, and I knew I was having prostate problems because he moved the floor mat from the truck and put it in front of the toilet. And anyhow, we went to see my GP. We've had him like for 25 years or something, and I explained the problems, and then he said, are you sexually active? And I said, no, I usually just lie there. And then he said,
Is there a question here?
no, there's no question. And then he said, well, if you have lots of sex, it's good for your prostate. And I said, could you write me a prescription and tell me where I can get it filled? And then he said to Blake, is he impotent? And he said, no, he's incompetent. And then he said, but I'll give you some free Viagra. He gave me samples. But you have to cut them in half because it interacts, so there's an interaction. And then he said, if you get an erection that lasts more than 4 hours, come and see me. And I said, there's a lot of other people I'd rather see. So.
John, I got a question. Do you do stand-up, or is that a personal question?
Thank you, John. I just had a question pertaining to another hospital that dispenses drugs. And my question is about the ping that occurs when you are getting your prescription early, perhaps because you're going on vacation or because you've accidentally left them at your daughter's in California, and it comes up as you're early to renew your prescription. One, and this is for my antidepressants in particular, when I wanted to be a week in advance because I didn't want to be stressed out 2 days before to go get them. And then my other question was regarding my ARVs that I received from this pharmacy. On multiple occasions, I sent my Valtegravir in far more quantities than what I actually am using, and I'm curious as to why the pill count for some pharmacies is not exactly what you need for that time frame. And I find this to be particularly true of Oak Tree. Unfortunately, my primary care, my HIV specialty care, and I adore it. However, I found that my ARVs there are not counted, and because our pickup policy at Oak Tree is so simple, it means that all we have to do is phone 48 hours in advance and pick them up. We don't have to speak to the pharmacist, we don't have to have a meeting. The women in BC are very fortunate for how that program runs. However, I wonder about that when the ping comes up for something that I'm being proactive about, and it's actually coming up as a why isn't she, or is she taking her meds question. And I think, Denise, you might be able to answer some of this as well. No?
We'll share. So thank you, Shelley. I think there were actually a few different questions in there. So I'll start off with the non-HIV ping part of that. and just explain some of the realities of the pharmacare system, which is that pharmacare, which pays for, unless you're shelling out of pocket, or even partly, even if they're just partly paying for it, pharmacare says we will only pay for essentially a 3-month supply at any one time. It's actually 100 days, which is just slightly more than that. And in fact, let's all remember too, pharmacare pays for HIV medications. So the reason there's the 3-month amount for HIV meds is we're bound to follow the pharmacare rules. But getting back to, say, the antidepressants or other medications, if there's a bit of a threshold, there's a little wiggle room because they don't want people to refill right on the day. But that pain comes up because the pharmacy actually will not be reimbursed by pharmacare, and they will be out of pocket for the cost of that medication, or have to charge you for the cost difference of that medication. Because really, they say, pharmacare says, you can get however, knock yourself out, get a year's worth, but we are only paying for 3 months at a time. And so that ping is a warning saying, now there are also some forms that can be filled out, but it's forms, and I realize, but there's actually a form, I believe, that says for early refill, that actually allows that reimbursement to happen. So that's that ping. But I think, with some planning and saying, now I need to refill this early because I'm leaving, is there something that I can do, to get the override button going into effect? I can't speak to the HIV, because I work at St. Paul's, it's a different dispensary. So I can't speak to whatever that other piece is.
I can't. I don't St. Paul's.
Oh, okay, right. Yes, thank you. That was exactly what I was wondering.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question.
Okay, it's me again.
Sorry, Michelle, I have one question online that I'd like to bring to the table.
Okay, go ahead.
Because we're getting low on time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our online user would like to know, what medication management strategies do the presenters recommend for older children, like 9 years plus, living with HIV? Younger ones probably fully depend on a parent, but the older ones may feel that they are more independent.
Because I used to be with Hummingbird Kids Society, this is something we had a bit of a problem with. When kids actually grew up with HIV, it was hard for them to see what would happen if they weren't on the medication. And after a while, they were dating people, and it was difficult. If they're going on a weekend, and 16-year-olds going on a weekend, or younger people going camping, how did they go to camp and have their meds dispensed to them? That was really tough, and a lot of the time, when they didn't have parents, their grandparents would have to go with them to dispense the meds. It was a very difficult situation. I know one kid with his grandparents. The grandparents had to hide behind a hut to give them the meds. Now you imagine the picture that is of a kid hiding behind the hut with the grandparents. Not too good a picture. And I think that the way I always used to explain it to parents was that kids have to know that this is something that's happening to their body. Nobody else needs to know about it. They take the meds, and think of the people who don't have the meds, is always what I ask for parents to say to their kids. Because there's a lot of children dying right now without those medications. So that's all that I could say on that point.
And I think without, knowing more of the context, can't be, too much more detailed, but I think certainly what we find time and time again is that as children go towards adolescence, which is often a rebellious phase for all teens, and a very troubled, time of feeling insecure, and it's a difficult time of life, that it is a real challenge where their HIV medication adherence tends to really go right off the rails, either through rebellion or just not wanting to do anything that mom and dad say or whatever reason. And it's a time of actually needing, I think, if anything, more support and more involvement from their adult care providers rather than less, because they can end up, and often do end up sometimes with drug resistance that will then last, so it is a tricky time and needs a lot of emotional support.
We have time for just the 2 last questions, or
No,
shall?
I'll ask the question.
Yeah.
If it's okay.
Oh, yeah. I'm on vacation now, so it's yeah.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, thank you for awesome presentations. My question is, as I'm aging, of course my memory's going really bad, and I have a whole pile of new specialists, and one of the questions they keep asking me, what is my HIV med history? Now, I was homeless, I didn't keep records of my meds or when I started them, how long, or when I changed meds, and they want to know my history. How can I get that history?
Actually, yes, so the BC Centre for, there's 2 ways. I mean, the one is calling St. Paul's Pharmacy, which is, we can give, the detailed history in terms of current doses and recent, changes. The other is this BC Centre for Excellence in HIV/AIDS, which has their number. It's all on the website, and it's on the top of every prescription form that we send out. And in fact, even if they just call the number of St. Paul's Pharmacy, which is on every prescription bottle, we can make sure that you get there. They print a patient profile summary, which actually is exactly that. It's only shared, just for privacy reasons, just so we're really clear here, it is only shared with care providers who are directly involved in patients' care. So, some guy can't just call up from the street and ask for that information. That's very private, but it includes viral load, drug resistance, and HIV medication history for as long as you were in BC. People who have lived in other provinces, that's a different story, but those are 2 very good ways to do that.
Hi there, quick question here. So when I've gone to my HIV specialist, and I do have to take some other meds other than my HIV meds, and sometimes there is an interaction, and I've been on one actually for about 15 years that still has an interaction. So my doctor will sometimes kind of go to and look it up and stuff, and I'm feeling a little like I'm unsure if she really knows like what's going on, and she'll tell me, okay, make sure you take them 2 hours apart. And then I've gone to see the pharmacy on IDC and stuff, and they're telling me, no, it should be 6 hours. So there's that line of like who's kind of more the expert. Is that more your guys' expertise versus the GP?
I'm not sure I want to weigh in on that one. I think, if there's, remember I'm a pharmacist, so I go with the pharmacist number. Yeah, no bias at all.
And I like my GP too.
I think if that's certainly one thing that you can raise with the pharmacist and say, okay, I'm confused here, but my GP says 2 hours, you're saying 6 hours. What's the reason? There may be an explanation for that. Maybe it's both under certain circumstances, and the pharmacist can say, in your circumstance, thinking of specifically what's going on for you, it's 6 hours, whatever. Or, that without knowing more of the detail, that's not a great example for me to be using. But I think there are, and it kind of gets to the more nuanced interpretation, I think, of a lot of drug interactions, where that slide with the things that go ping, 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 there may be an interaction, but the interpretation of how important it is, there can be some variability. I think if there's that kind of scenario, I think really a way to solve it is the pharmacist needs to talk to your doctor so that we can sort out what the issues are potentially. I'm not trying to pit one against the other.
No, nor am I.
And what you need is the bottom line information, which maybe if there is that kind of scenario, whatever it is, the pharmacist and doctor need to talk so that there can be everybody's on the same page.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing on that I'm kind of active, a little bit of an activist like that. So I would immediately march back to my doctor's office or, go over to my doctor and say, what's going on? You told me 3 to 6 hours and then somebody else is telling me 2 to 4 hours. Like, what is the right thing? Because I need to know. And I would make them aware that there's this discrepancy between the two of them, and that doesn't work as a patient. Like we need to know that stuff, right? So I would go and tell them.
Wow, what a great group, and thank you so much for staying and engaging in the Q&A. I think it was just a fabulous presentation. Again, thank you, girls. Before we go, I also want to give a huge thank you to our staff and service at the Chateau Granville. As usual, they have gone above and beyond. I'm thoroughly impressed that their menu keeps getting better. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'd also like to again thank AbbVie, Gilead, Janssen, Merck, and Vive Shear for their sponsorship. Particularly our brilliant sponsors this evening, Denise Becker-Wozniak and Kathy Lepek. Good night, everyone. Please take the time to fill out your evaluation form on the table. You can just leave it there. It is how we continue to bring community forums and lunch and learns to you. We truly appreciate and would like your input into the next topics that we could possibly present. Thank you all for coming. Don't forget to register for the Lunch and Learn. It's this coming Tuesday at Positive Living 803 East Hawks on HIV and brain health. Thank you all for coming.